bad boys, what you want, what you gonna do when Chevy John Brown come for you? Tell me what you wanna do, Yeah.
Hello and welcome back to Most Unwanted, an X-Files podcast. We're back after a short break. I'm joined by Daniel Checkley, who is fresh.
Hello.
Have I introduced myself? I'm Luke Costin. Chex is back with us. At the moment, he's still here, but by the time you're listening to this, he will have returned from the US of A. So,
yeah, there's a bit of time travel nonsense here because obviously we carried on recording straight after our hiatus of airing episodes, so that we'd have episodes to air when I'm away. So now I've got to kind of act like, well, I don't have to act like it, but I've been away by the time this comes out, but I don't know what I did. So I've kind of got to guess. You know what? America was great. Really enjoyed America. I loved all the flamingos.
But
so many flamingos.
For an edit point, now, cut. Now say America was really bad.
It's a good point, yeah. America. Whoa, don't go there. And then you can pick a choose A or B. Or, imagine.
Or, as I will probably do, leave both in.
Well, I know in California, at the moment, at the time of recording, there's like a massive heat wave, and I know it took like all the power out from LA. So I imagine that's still the case.
Actually,
yeah, it's meant to be like really, really bad over there. Well, I say bad, like in the grand scheme of things, not really. It's a night without power, but you know what I mean. It's still fairly a bit troublesome.
Yeah, but California gets like that from what I hear, though, doesn't it? It like sort of every sort of around this time of year, it gets like ridiculously hot, and like, you know, if there can be like fires as well, and it's kind of like Australia in that sense. Like,
wildfires, yeah. But pretty much yearly you hear about that. You know what I'm worried about? I'm worried about because when you sort of look at, especially like in Arizona, New Mexico, and stuff like that, when you're traveling sort of on towards LA. And you look at like what best time of year to drive that route is. They tell you that like October's a good time because it's not too hot, it's not like unbearably hot, but you will have like pack for all weathers because you'll have like some storms, you'll have rain, you'll have this. And I'm just thinking like this year, especially with all the weather being as crazy as it is, imagine it's like mega storms.
You're just like stranded by like a tornado or anything.
We can't visit any other sites. We just drove on a road. We couldn't even see them through the windows.
Yeah, it's I guess it's one of the things with traveling. It's you're left to the mercies of just whatever happens there, basically. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I suppose, that's life in general, isn't it?
It's part of the fun. Fun. You just don't know what you're gonna get.
That is true. Well, let's hope you don't have any run-ins with the cops like Mulder and Scully did in this episode. So this week we are looking at episode 12 of series 6. Coming off of a quite heavy episode, we come back with an episode called X-Cops, which was a bit of a surprise. I knew kind of what it was about anyway, but in the way it was executed, it's very much an interesting episode, I thought.
Yeah, I feel like this was purposefully done. Throughout this episode, I'm looking at it going, this is quite a good idea as a sort of, we say this all the time. The amount of times that we say that like the same sort of phrase throughout episodes is crazy, but I'm going to say palate cleanser once again. But it does feel a lot like that, you know what I mean? Where it's very, very different, a very, very different style of episode.
Yeah, I do like this with X-Files as well, that they have this kind of, I suppose when you've got this breadth of amount of episodes that you have in a series, you can kind of get experimental, and this definitely felt like an experimental episode in that sense.
You know what? I don't feel like they did this in the earlier seasons.
No,
this feels like it's something that they're trying more and more as the show goes on. Because you do, like you said, when you've got this many episodes, you do have that sort of leeway of just like this episode, we're going to try something completely new. And if it doesn't land, it's one episode of 24, you know what I mean? Exactly, it's not the end of the world.
And if it's not tied to the mythology story, then it doesn't matter really at the end of the day. It's like, oh, well, if the people don't like that, they can skip that one, you know what I mean? Like, it's not the end of the world. But yeah, this episode was directed by Michael Watkins. It was written by Vince Gilligan. And the original air date was February the 20th, 2000. So we start, as every episode of Cops does, with the opening to Cops.
I think we should, before we carry on, have you ever watched an episode of Cops?
I've never watched a full episode of Cops, but I mean, you don't have to have watched a full episode to know what Cops is, you know what I mean? Or have the intro, which is, like, iconic.
Yeah, I feel like Cops, for me, I've seen a lot of knockoff shows of Cops. I don't think I've actually seen Cops.
Yeah.
No, whether like maybe Cops isn't the original, I don't know. Or is it actually, is that the name of the show? I don't...
What, the name of the show is Cops?
Yeah. Is that or is it like just a spoof version of that of a show?
Yeah. So the Cops is an actual show. Funnily enough, it's on the Fox network, so that's how they've got around that.
Oh, so it's easy to get the rights for that.
Yeah. So it's an actual show. I've never I know about it, but yeah, it's one of those where it's like over here we have like Channel 5's version of Cops, you know what I mean, where it's like police traffic investigators or something like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
same kind of thing.
Never as interesting.
No. By the title alone, Cops or police traffic investigators. Yeah, it's that's England for you. But yeah, we start and we have the intro to Cops, which it's just that immediately sucked me into the episode because that Cops intro is just iconic, really, to be honest. And it proper pumped me up for this episode. And then after this, we get Deputy Keith Wetzel, and he's talking about being a cop and just like the sort of the struggles he has and stuff like that. And they get this like call in about something attacking. Well, they call it a monster, but this thing is attacking somebody's house. He goes to the house, and we see like I don't know if we see the scratches on the door at this point, but they're sort of investigating. The woman won't let them into the house. She speaks Spanish, and they go around to the back of the house to sort of investigate. Wetzel comes running out, completely terrified, and he tells the cameraman to just run as well. They get him back into the car, and then the car is just flipped over sort of onto its top. And that's the end of the intro anyway. And then we go into the actual X-Files intro as well. So you get the double of this one. It's
hard not to get sucked in by this intro, I found.
Yeah.
Because again, like you said, it's different. And I mean, it kind of had a boom, like, you know, the held camera footage, like camera footage way of filming, like Cops does before, like a drama. It had like a boom again, didn't it? Like the sort of 2010s almost.
This was the same time as Blair Witch as well, though, like 2000s one, isn't it? Like I think Blair Witch came out around this time, so that
it might actually sort of be around about the same time. But I mean. The problem is, I really find this an interesting way of filming a show. It gives you a very different perspective. I think there's a lot of clever things and clever little tactics you can use to really get into, like, put yourself into a character in that show.
Yeah.
Which I think, I've always enjoyed it. It did get overplayed, which I think a lot of people have bad memories of, like, found footage type of films, because of how often they were utilised. You think that you've got Paranormal Activity, you've got Cloverfield, you've got what was that French one? As Above, So Below. Like, there's just a lot of different, and then they don't use them anymore because it's just so overplayed. But I've always been a fan of them because I do think it's just a different feel to it.
Mm-hmm. That kind of this will probably colour my overall thoughts on the show, but I absolutely love found footage like films. Like I've always been a big fan of them. Like there was even the ones that don't have great quality, there's sort of like gems and bits and pieces of like the way they tell the story I find really interesting. So there was like an anthology of different horror films called VHS, and they did like different ones.
I remember VHS.
Like that to be honest, as like a complete package, it's not that good, but I love it, like, just because it's this like interesting way of how they sort of adapt it, so it's from somebody's point of view, you know what I mean, like, and how they work that in.
That also is a key feature of the genre, which is doesn't have to, like, quality is secondary. It doesn't have to be a great quality, because you kind of
get away
are able to get away with that because it's part of the film. But
yeah,
I mean, as well, like if you look at like films like Cloverfield, which I'd say is one of the biggest films that came out using that technique, it also gives you a really clever way of getting around like CGI and production costs, because like you can have that guy fall over and miss something completely, and you know what I mean, and it's more about what you imagine's there rather than what's actually there.
A brief glimpse of it as they pan around or something like that. There's a lot of ways of it's an interesting. I understand like criticisms of it. I do get that it was overplayed a bit, but I never sort of fell out of love with with that sort of genre of film. But yeah, anyway, we'll get on to the rest of the episode anyway. So after the intro, I didn't mention as well, right at the very beginning, before we had the cops intro, we had this like sort of text intro saying that we have a special X-Files episode today. There was a reason for that, like that they included all that.
Did people think it was Cops?
Yeah, basically they didn't want people to turn over thinking it was like a rerun of Cops or they missed it or something. So they had to, they had the double of that text intro and then the X-Files intro as well to kind of say, no, it's definitely X-Files, stick with it. But anyway, so we see, after the credits, we see some backup officers who have arrived at the scene, sort of looking as to what's happened. They sort of suggested it might be, they could call them gangbangers, which I always find that word funny. It just means people in a gang, isn't it? Like, basically.
Yeah, it's got different connotations over here.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. But they basically say they think it was, something like that, but the officer who's in the car is a bit confused because of they didn't see anybody like that. He's sort of knocked around, so he's not able to completely coherently describe what's happened. But yeah, they still. He doesn't really want to say that something paranormal was going on, so he's
that's the thing, isn't it? I think he's also covering up the fact that I think he feels embarrassed that everyone, especially with the cameras, and I think that plays an important role throughout the episode.
That's the thing. Yeah, this is like the first hint that no one wants to look an idiot on TV.
Yeah,
apart from Mulder, who is more than willing.
I mean, I know he's not even been introduced yet, but Mulder constantly, like, he was like when you get like family footage of like. Like when you like, oh, look at the kids playing, and you got that one kid that's always smiling, looking at the camera and showing off, doing a cartwheel. That's Mulder in this episode.
Yeah. Did you catch him doing the butt slide over the bonnet?
I didn't even pick that.
There's a bit later on. We'll get to it. We'll get to it later. But basically, when they're like, when they get the call in for, I can't remember where it is. There's another place they have to go to. And they all go to jump in the car, and literally Mulder does the Dukes of Hazzard slide over the bonnet. It's like, oh yeah, it's hilarious. Like, as soon as I saw that, I was like, you can tell Mulder is like loving every second of this. He wants to be a movie star. Well, that's why he moved to California, as we know.
As we know.
So yeah, the sergeant sort of can't get a straight answer out of them, and then the officers start getting calls to two individuals who are armed, and they have to go and apprehend them. So we follow the officers, and they go running down the street, and then we see this sort of shot of Mulder and Scully with the back to the camera. We know who they are straight away, but it's back to the camera. They've got their hands in the air, and they keep just shouting FBI. They eventually check their badge, and they sort of explain what they're doing there, that they're investigating a report of monsters in the area, but it's only when the moon's full, which again, Mulder is very happy to disclose these details, and what he thinks it is, every time the camera pans to Scully, she hides.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. Like,
yeah, you can tell that she's not happy to be here. But
it's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? Because obviously, in a normal episode, we as an audience aren't there. We're like third party. We like in that scene, it's just Mulder and Scully, and now the audience is there. You get to see like what Scully feels about everything in front of people. So she's happy to open up and she's happy to talk about paranormal with Mulder, and that's what we see all the time. And it is interesting to get a little bit of and it's almost like jarring as well, where you see like this Mulder and Scully in front of an audience and how ridiculous it all does sound. And now Scully's like, well, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Can you not? Until she basically gets told by Skinner later on that you can't look like you're hiding things from the front. And then she's like begrudgingly sort of has to open up about these things. But yeah. So yeah, Mulder goes to speak to the deputy whose car was flipped. And he starts to describe what's been explained in the area, and he has a drawing as well. Mulder and his drawings, they really come back to bite him in this episode. But yeah, he has this drawing of what they think attacked some other guy in the last full moon, and it looks like a werewolf, the description he gave. And he also sees that the deputy looks like he's been bitten. So he thinks at this point we need to quarantine the deputy just in case it is a werewolf and, he might be a danger to others.
Yeah.
The deputy sergeant, a woman called Paula, thinks that Mulder is absolutely crazy. To which this is the first time we get bleeped, censored, like sort of swearing in the X-Files. She's like, "Are you out of your fucking mind?" Well, he's describing it. This reminded me a lot of like, because it's like the paranormal aspect to it in this mundane setting. This very much felt like a precursor, and it's the comedy as well, a precursor to What We Do in the Shadow, What We Do in the Shadows.
Well, it's funny because there's that spin-off show to that show, isn't there? Of
the police. What's it called? Wellington
Paranormal or something like that.
I think so. Yeah, something like that.
And it's very similar to this. Two police officers investigating paranormal on a cops-like show, and I do wonder like whether they take an inspiration from this.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think so, wouldn't you? If this like came out in 2000, they would have probably.
I dare say doing their research, they've at least come across it. Yeah, it's a very similar type of show.
Yeah,
it's great. It's just very clever, very very clever use. And again, you're not only getting the X-Files tropes, but I'm sure you're getting a lot of the cops tropes too, like with the bleeping of the swearing. Like that felt like it was put there for a reason, and I feel like the reason was, I imagine, and again, I don't know myself, but I imagine. In a normal cop show, there's a lot of bleeping out swear words.
yeah. People, if they've been arrested, probably don't hold back.
Yeah, exactly. So I imagine that was put there to sort of give that real cops-like feel to it.
Yeah, and this is the first instance we see of Scully actually hiding from all this, because he's going into detail about this werewolf that chased him basically, and she's hiding behind the police car and kind of pulls Mulder aside and basically says, "Knock it off! Like there's cameras here, you know what I mean?" The deputy goes to talk to the woman in the home. And she explains that it was a claw monster that was attacking them. So they think that it's definitely the werewolf at this point. You actually see claw marks in the door, and they seem Mulder notes that it's one for each finger as well. So we think that it is definitely some human that's turned into a monster.
Yeah.
But they get a sketch artist to draw the descriptions that this woman gives. And yeah, the sketch that he gives back is literally Freddy Krueger. The reveal of this absolutely killed me, because it's just how it just pans down. It is that comic timing of like it was a claw monster, it turns it around, and it's literally just a picture of Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
I feel like at this point you sort of know the direction the episode's going. It's like it's got this serious tinge to it, but it's mainly told through like dark comedy.
Yeah, for sure. And I kind of guessed what the monster was at this point as well. I feel like it wasn't like a big mystery episode, so you kind of got the idea that it was like playing on each victim's fears rather than an actual.
I didn't get it from the Freddy part. I got it from the next one where it's the woman talking about her boyfriend, and you sit, and when you find out that, I'm jumping around a bit, but you find out that her boyfriend allegedly killed that guy. I got the feeling then it was like, I remember seeing a Supernatural episode and it had a similar kind of monster. What's it called now? Tulpa or something like that. Something where it like lives in nightmares or something. They never explicitly say what this is.
No, the monster's very secondary in this whole episode.
Yeah, which I didn't mind. Again, sometimes you don't need to explain it too much, because you kind of know, you know what I mean, what it's doing. Like, you don't need an explanation of where it's come from, and
again, like we said, found footage style of shooting. Like, you don't need to see the monster. Like, the whole idea of it is like, oh, they just missed it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Every time they just missed it. Mulder starts thinking at this point that it might not be a werewolf. And this is where the police get another call. And they have to scramble. It's at this point that Mulder does his bonnet jump. Honestly, if you've got 5 minutes, just go back and watch that bit where they get called out. I will
definitely do that.
He literally slides, or not in like the most heroic way, but attempts to slide over it. You know,
in what he imagine is a heroic way.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what would happen if me or you tried to do it?
Basically, yeah. Mulder's more than happy to try and go with the police. Scully's like, no way, you're not coming in the car with us, to the camera crew. And this is where we find that the sketch artist who he'd been sent away earlier, he's dead at a payphone, and he's got these claw marks through his bulletproof vest. And they also find that there's this pink fingernail at the crime scene, like a stick-on fingernail. And then they realize that this has been called in by a couple from over the road. Now, they introduce Steve and Eddie at this point, who I'm going to say they are the MVPs of this episode. I fucking love Steve and Eddie.
The best characters of this episode. Yeah. I'll kind of midway get into my like overall episode review. I really enjoyed the start of this episode. I felt like it got old quicker than I thought it would. Yeah. How do I put this? I found it a little bit tedious, like the whole cops sort of spin-off thing. I thought like it just went on too much, and it was the same sort of like, let's just run, and we're running around, and we're just chasing nothing, we're chasing dreams and whatnot. And so yeah, I wasn't as high up on the whole episode as a whole. These two characters are phenomenal. Like, nothing bad to say about these two characters. I think these were great.
No, they are I mean, I can't think of a bad thing to say about them. Every line of dialogue they have is captivating. It's just an argument.
Yeah, exactly. For comedic effect, and brings a bit of heart to the episode as well.
Yeah. You get an actual... That's the thing. Like, in the middle of it, you get this kind of really, like, inspiring sort of story of these two people, like, who are like, we don't care, we love each other, and we're not going to be moved or scared out of this place no matter what.
Yeah.
And we find out in the end that that's the ultimate sort of triumph over this creature, is it can't hurt them because of that. But anyway, so they called in the attack, and they basically say that the fingernail belongs to a prostitute who works in the area called Chantara, I think her name is. And she also has pink hair. That's how you'll be able to notice her. So they sort of go around trying to look for them. Again, this is where Scully basically doesn't want the camera crew in the car, where Mulder is like more than happy to... Well, he's including them in everything.
Yeah.
So they managed to find...
Right, just before you get into the next bit, like the last 2-3 minutes, your internet's like really dropped off, dude. Like, you're very robotic. I don't know whether it's going to come through onto this like that, but I don't know whether it's worth checking.
Yeah, I think it's fine on this because it records locally on each side.
Okay, cool. So I can still make out what you're saying, so it's not the end of the world, but I just wanted to make sure if you wanted to check it just in case.
I'll make sure my...
Because you're very pixelated. It's pixelated and it keeps freezing the screen. But when the screen freezes, your voice comes through fine and the screen will come back on and it's like robotic again.
I'll make sure that the...
As I say, it might be worth just like maybe checking this one, because we can always just cut the two together, can't we? And just seeing whether it works. And if it does, I can.
I'm pretty confident to be fine because I can still see all of the recording as well. I've unplugged my PlayStation and I've turned off the Wi-Fi on my thing. Has it got any better
already? Yeah.
I reckon the PlayStation just started downloading something probably.
Yeah.
Cool. Where do I get to anyway? It's
pink hair.
It's good to have a pause as well because there's a lot of like things to cover on this one. Because everything keeps happening, like there's loads and loads to cover. Like
it's a lot of running around to a place, talking. Or what did you see? Running to the next place. What did you see?
Yeah. So Mulder and Scully eventually head off and drive around the neighborhood and find this woman. And she basically is scared and doesn't want to explain what's happening, and she doesn't really want to be involved with them. Obviously, being a prostitute, like it's sort of a worry for her. Maybe she's going to get like sort of arrested or anything like that. So she's a bit hesitant to speak to them.
Pretty sure the only reason why they wrote this character as a prostitute is so that they could use the pixelated face graphic. It's another cops trope gimmick.
It's that pixelated face graphic, and it also leads into quite a gruesome death later on that they don't actually have to show.
I never even thought of it that way. Very clever.
So they sort of got around having to show like something like quite horrendous. They find this woman and they say, and Mulder basically tells her, tell her what happened, no matter how bizarre. He's basically saying. Again, he gets really performative while he's talking to her. He's like, no matter what you've seen, I've seen much more, much worse, and all this. Like, he's like trying to. You
almost imagine a David Brent-esque sort of like look to the camera, don't you? And a wink.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's unreal how much he's pandering at this point to the audience. And she says that she saw her boyfriend, Chico Muniz. And it was him who attacked the sketch artist. And this is where Mulder is a bit dejected. He's like, "Oh, it is gangsters after all."
Yeah.
They call it in, and they all head to where Chico is sort of holed up in this sort of like drug den. They keep Chantara with them. Because they say they'll keep her safe there. She doesn't need to worry. She keeps getting agitated before this is happening, basically saying that he's gonna kill her, and she mentions that she was gonna have her head twisted off, basically. Which we see later on what happens there, and it kind of portrays again what's going on here. So the FBI and the police all storm the house. They start arresting the people in there, and they also find the what's his name, Chuko here, but he's dead. He OD'd, and they deduce he's been dead for quite a while, so there's no way he could have killed this guy. You hear shooting outside, and as they go back outside, we see the deputy from earlier, and he was basically just firing at nothing. But we can't see anything they're shooting at. But as they go over to it, I don't know if it's at this point or later on, they notice that the bullets definitely hit something, but they can't say what it was because they couldn't see it.
Yeah.
We go over to Chantara, and we see that she's dead, and has, as she sort of feared, she's had her head twisted around. This is where we sort of get this confirmation that it's fears that are sort of being preyed on.
Very, very much so, and more like, obviously, as all this is going on, it's inducing a lot more fear, and like it's interesting now because the victims are almost choosing their own death, because rather than just general fears like Freddy Krueger, for example, it's more like, oh, I'm scared this thing is going to happen, and then it happens. There's a bit later on where I know we'll get to it, but where they get worried about that disease.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I thought that was a great scene to sort of showcase that. So we'll get to that when we get to that.
So we sort of it keeps dipping out to the cops sort of logo as well as this is happening, and goes to like I imagine this is where the breaks are when it was like broadcast. But after we come back from that, we sort of see the deputy talking about what he saw, and basically he's saying that there's no way this thing could have got past them. He wouldn't have let anything past them. And he also admits that what he saw wasn't a werewolf, wasn't Freddy Krueger, wasn't any of this. He said it was a wasp man, which is something his brother made up when they were the kids, like something with wasps, stingers for teeth or something like that, which sort of matches with what they thought was a bite. It's actually multiple stings.
Yeah.
So it's that same kind of thing. So this is where Mulder sort of starts explaining his theory to Scully that this isn't a werewolf. It's some kind of like shape-shifting thing that basically lives off fears, or human fears. And this is where they sort of get the explanation that it's killing them by their worst nightmares. So Scully plays along with it and tries to figure out how they can sort of track this down and catch it. And they realize that there's like a chain of victims so far, and they're
all connected with each other.
Yeah, they're all linked. And they think at this point, the only one it's skipped over is Steve and Eddie. So Mulder and Scully return to Steve and Eddie, who are having a full-on domestic dispute. Which, we get this sort of tit-for-tat fight. They're there for a few hours and nothing happens. And it's quite interesting, as we mentioned, sort of in this point, that we find it that they aren't scared of dying. One is just scared of losing the other. You know what I mean? And they it's this sort of like baseless fear that he's not going to leave. Like it's that kind of normal fears that couples have, I guess.
It's interesting because you wonder whether this fear monster, like, is it just killing people, or is it making people's fears come alive? Like, and then you wonder, oh well, would they be having that argument on that night if Steve wasn't so scared of losing Eddie? Do you know what I mean? Is this argument just a manifestation of the fear itself? But obviously we don't know, because we just don't know how the monster really works. It's never explained to us, but it is an interesting look into it. But the fact that, like you said, they overcome that fear and then they're not harmed in any other way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's ultimately, again, they're not scared of all the other things are scared of dying in some way. This isn't a fear of death, like, you know, it's just a normal fear. You know what I mean? Like, so it's that ultimately nothing comes of it from these two. And
basically, what we're saying is, if it's ignoring fear about, like, any fear that's not about dying, it's just focusing on that. If this came to England, you'd be screwed, my friend, and I'd be all right.
Why is that?
Well, you've got that fear of death, haven't you?
Just a general fear. It's all right, but I wouldn't die in any specific way. I'd just die.
Just die. It would be the most uncinematic death.
Just literally the heart just stops and just collapses. I'm like, there you go. Yeah, it wouldn't either that, or like I said, my fears are like quite daft ones. Like, it's either heights or there's that one about standing in places where I can't see my feet.
Yeah.
That there's going to be glass or needles or something sharp going in my feet. Again, so maybe that would kill me. I'd do that, and then I'd fall off a building. What a way to go.
Or you fall off a building, and because you can't see where you're landing, you land feet first onto a needle.
It'd be like, is it Saw 2 where that woman gets chucked in the needle pit?
Oh yeah,
it'd be like that. That's
a nice
way to go. Yeah. Anyway, less Saw discussion. So they leave Steve and Eddie as they've sort of reconciled now, and they bump into the deputy, and Scully also goes off to do the autopsy on is it Chuko, the gang guy?
Yes,
to see what he died from as well. I
think the autopsy's on Shantara.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. In the notes, I've got their last names and I can't remember which was which. It is Shantara Gomez. Yeah, right. So we see Mulder and the deputy talking about what he thought he saw, and Wetzel basically at this point starts saying how he can't explain these things, but he can't talk about them either because they'll just ruin his career. No one wants a superstitious police officer. This is a brilliant scene because he's talking about no one wants a superstitious police officer, or no one wants the guy who's jumping at shadows or believes in the occult. Literally saying this to Mulder, whose entire career is based around this.
But again, to play devil's advocate on his side, Mulder's not in front of a camera all the time.
Yes, yeah.
And so this guy has a very different job where he's almost got to play the cool guy in front of the camera because everything he does in this situation will be recorded.
Yeah, so he can't look cowardly and stuff like that. And he's talking quite honestly about his actual fears as well, that he's just scared that every moment he goes out there, he's going to die. You know what I mean? Like, he's putting himself on the firing line.
Yeah.
And, everyone's angry at him. He's always going into dangerous situations. And it is, when you hear these sort of fears of what's it, it does sound like, not a great job sometimes. No. You know what I mean? Like, going into these situations. So on the flip side, we sort of see Scully doing this autopsy, and the coroner who's doing it is just terrified of dealing with this person. And she doesn't really go into why, but she's like, maybe we should wear masks, or maybe we should do this, that, and the other. And Scully's like, it's fine. It's not like they died from a broken neck. It's not like they had the hantavirus, which I'd never heard of, but I guess it must have been a bigger thing in the 2000s, maybe.
I've got no idea what it is.
No.
I can have a quick look whilst we're...
if you want to
you carry on, and I'll have a quick look. If you want to
do some Googling.
A bit of Googling.
But if, she mentions that she didn't die of the hantavirus. As soon as she mentions the hantavirus, what's a coroner? Yeah, I was trying to think. I was going to say coronary. That's when
it's very different.
It's a very different thing. I won't go into details, but if you know, you know. This coroner then starts freaking out and is like, "Why have you mentioned that? What is it?" And then immediately gets this like bleeding nose, collapses, and she starts like I don't know if it's blood or foam starts coming from her mouth, and basically, they call it in. When they do the autopsy on her, they realize that she's died of all the symptoms from hantavirus. She got them immediately with no sort of exposure to it at all. She's just died from the same reasons, basically.
And not only that, it's like Scully even says during the episode, this should happen over years, not seconds.
Yeah.
And I thought this was really clever to sort of show how dangerous this monster is. Because at this point, if you're not going to show the monster, one of the key things that you have to do is show the danger.
Yeah.
Show the danger that the monster poses to your main characters. And we have seen that but there's been a lot of off-screen deaths. And so it's hard to get invested in it. But then when you show me a character that goes, oh, all of a sudden I'm scared of this, bang, they're dead from that exact thing. Yeah. And that I think that really raises the stakes. And it's almost like, what I can't even remember what film it is. Oh, I know what film it is. It's Ghostbusters. But it's very much that scene of like, clear your minds, and then as soon as someone tells you, don't think of anything scary, what are you going to do? You're going to think of the scariest thing that you can come up with.
Yeah, exactly.
So I thought that was a very cool and interesting way of like really upping the stakes, and it became a lot more like, this is an issue now, we've got to sort this now because people are in danger.
Yeah.
By the way, I found out that the hantavirus is basically it's a disease that comes from rodents. So whether it can affect humans that have come into contact with rodent urine, saliva, or feces. Quite deadly, apparently.
Yeah, I've not heard of that. The only one I know from like rodents is what is it called? Weil's disease or Weil's disease or something like that. Is it W? Something like that. I know you can get that. So I don't know if that's something similar, maybe.
Possibly.
It might just have a different name, but I know that's the same kind of thing. It's like quite it's bad for you and can be deadly. But yeah, you have to be careful.
But an interesting fact here, the incubation period is 2 to 4 weeks before typical illness starts. So in this episode, works a lot faster.
Yeah. At least when it's an imaginary hantavirus. This is where Mulder now starts to... He's completely fixated on what this thing is now. He says it's this kind of like force. What he said earlier, that it preys on fear, but the reason why it's come here is because it's quite a high crime rate area and everyone's scared, so it can easily feed off fears of people in the area. So Mulder thinks that Scully was fine because she didn't have a fear of contracting this disease, whilst the assistant did. So this is where they sort of realize that if you don't have a fear, or if you're not scared of dying of something, you're immune to it, essentially.
Yeah.
So this is, and they say this is what made Steve and Eddie basically not have any problems, because they don't have mortal fears. Their fears are very normal, like, human fears. So they aren't really they don't really believe that this is the case, but he mentions the conversation he had earlier with Wetzel, and they think that he's in danger now because he's gone alone into this sort of environment.
And he's the only one that's experienced it and hasn't died.
Yeah, basically. And then we see Mulder and Scully go back to this sort of the drug den that they found Chuko. And we see that Wetzel is missing. They're looking around and they find the camera crew from cops hiding in a cupboard. And they hear from upstairs this sort of like banging and fighting. They go up to the room that he's in, and Mulder basically jeers him up to sort of say, you've just got to, it basically tells him, he says cowboy up, doesn't he? Which basically is just like this. It's kind of this like macho. You gotta. I mean, in this situation, definitely is needed.
Yeah. No, none of your woke nonsense here.
Yeah. There's sometimes where it's like, it might not help, but in this situation, yeah. I keep thinking, when people tell you grow some balls and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's that
which
kind
is
of
usually
thing.
Like in today, it's between 2022. It's like we've moved past things like that. If there's a fear monster, I think it's fine. I think we can let it slide.
My favorite response when somebody says "grow some balls" is they say it on somebody says it to Mark on Peep Show, and he says, "What? So I have 4 testicles? How will that help me?" But yeah, so they sort of jeer this guy up, and they open the door and they find that the deputy's alive. He's sort of worse for wear, but he's alive. But we don't really know if it's him overcoming his fear, because they also note that the sun came up and this would be the end of the full moon. So this could be the reason why the entity is gone as well. And this is where we sort of end the episode, that this creature's gone, and we sort of survive the night, basically.
Yeah.
So that's it. Yeah.
There was an interesting line at the end where Scully sort of like comforts Mulder, because Mulder's a little bit dejected that they've like didn't get to find it on camera. They didn't get the chance to like prove one of his theories on camera, and so she's like comforting him, and Mulder's like, he's not too sort of put off by it, and he basically says that it all depends on how the footage is edited in post rather than actually what happened. But then I did wonder as I was watching this, I was like, but this monster's going to be back in 2 weeks. Like, we know it attacks every full moon. Like, this isn't over. Just be here in 2 weeks' time.
And they come back, Maybe they've just got a short attention span, the X-Files. Like, we've got other things to worry about. But yeah, that's the end of the episode. It's a bit of a roller coaster in the notes, because there's a lot happening where they keep moving around from locations. It's more of like moving from scene to scene to scene to tracking everything that's going on than like sort of analyzing the sort of bits in between the scenes, I guess.
Yeah,
because you literally seen it as it's unfolding. I think they mentioned in the production notes it's a strange episode of the X-Files in the fact that it plays out pretty much in real time, whereas the X-Files usually you sort of have jumps around in time and this and that. This is literally as it happens. You know what I mean? You get this sort of quite uninterrupted run of it. So yeah, it is interesting how to track it in the notes. But anyway, what did you think of the episode?
I enjoyed the first 15 and the last 5. I thought it was a very fun idea for 15 minutes. And then I got tired of it. Not like I'm down on it either. Like, as I say, the Stephen Eddy was great. I enjoyed like little moments between Mulder and Scully and like Mulder and the camera as well. Like, that was a whole new relationship dynamic of like Mulder and the audience almost. That we got to witness, and that was a lot of fun to play around with. I just thought the novelty of it wore thin pretty quickly, and then it just became a case of just chasing them around with a camera, and that grew. I grew tired of that a lot quicker than I thought I would, to be honest. But as a whole, I thought it was a fun. Once again, I'll say it, a palate cleanser. I thought it was a really fun episode to come off that sort of mythology arc.
I don't know how this has happened, but I absolutely love this episode. It's I think it's like the perfect mix for me of like, so this fan footage mockumentary style of episode. I thought I like that style. I thought it was really witty and well written in like the comedy of everything, and then just even like the as you mentioned, the sort of grounded sort of heartfelt parts, you know, like the conversation with Stephen Eddy and with Wetzel as well, of just his fears and stuff like that. I thought that was really interesting, and I thought that the monster idea was really, really cool. Like this
monster
that just whatever you fear, it emulates that to kill you. You know what I mean? Like I thought that was such a cool idea for sort of a monster of the week, and the fact that you never see it as well. It's kind of that old horror movie thing of what you don't see is scarier than what you actually do. You know what I mean? So we have these descriptions, all these terrifying things that they've seen. We don't see it at all. Like, you know what I mean? We just see the after effects of it. So I thought that definitely played into it. I really love this episode. I can understand like all of your criticisms. I can completely get, to be honest. Like it is a lot from going scene to scene to scene and chasing stuff around. I do get that, and writing the notes of it was you had to try and keep up with it.
Tricky, I was going to say very fast paced,
but it never dissuaded me from the episode. Like, I really enjoyed it. Like, it's probably the easiest rating I'm ever going to give, I think, which probably preludes what might. Oh God, I can't speak now. What might happen in the notes.
Luke's production notes.
X-Cops was inspired by the Fox television program Cops, which Vince Gilligan described as a great slice of Americana. Gilligan first pitched the idea during the show's 4th season to the X-Files writing staff and series creator Chris Carter, the latter of whom was concerned that the concept was too goofy. Fellow writer and producer Frank Spotnitz concurred, although he was more uncomfortable with Gilligan's idea of using videotape instead of film. The show's production crew liked to use film to create effective scares. Now, I didn't know there was a difference between tape and film in creating scares, but I guess like people in certain industries will sort of have their like preferences on how to do things. Maybe
film is a lot easier in post as well.
Yeah,
so
I think
film,
so.
like tape is like notoriously difficult to edit and get. Like the shots don't look the same, and it's very difficult. Whereas with you can edit the look of film, so that's why it's a lot easier to work with. But on the flip side, tape is not only a lot cheaper, a lot quicker as well.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if that played into the monster idea as well, and the fact that we never see any of these outrageous things because they can't edit them in.
Exactly, that's an interesting concept, because I was thinking this, and I was like, this has got to be the cheapest episode to have filmed.
Yeah.
I bet they could have filmed this in a night. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I don't know if they mention about budget, but yeah, in terms of like speed of filming, they do mention that in the production notes and just how quick it was. But yeah, I'll carry on with that one anyway. And Spotness worried that shooting exclusively in videotape would be too challenging, as the series would be unable to cut and edit the final product. During the show's 7th season, Carter relented. Many critics and fans believed, erroneously, that the 7th season of The X-Files would be the show's last. So, spoilers, this isn't the last series of The X-Files, guys. Similarly, Carter felt that the show had nearly run its course and seen the potential in Gilligan's ideas. He decided to greenlight the episode. Gilligan noted that the longer we've been on air, the more chances we've taken. We've tried to keep the show fresh. I think Carter appreciates that.
I'd like to ask a question to all the listeners of this show. I'd like to know, what was, like, for people who watch this live along with like the sort of airing of the shows, I would like to know what the general feel of the X-Files was around this time, because we've heard this a lot, that they sort of expected it to wind down. Was people expecting like it to build something big at the end, or was people expecting it to sort of like fizzle out? I don't know whether people were annoyed by it or like upset that it was like ending, or like was like trying to G it up to go again. I'd like to know what the like basically the inner zeitgeist was about it. Do you know what I mean?
It's one thing that I've always found with TV shows, like you can never capture what it was like at the time. Like you could, because everything's written in hindsight. You know what I mean? So like, I imagine in sort of 10 years' time, people writing, this is just from like taking something that we watched along at the time. In 10 years' time, what people will be writing about Game of Thrones will sort of forget what it felt like when like Game of Thrones was in its 4th season, in its 5th season. Do you know what I mean? Like where it was like, this is amazing, like this is the best thing on TV and stuff like that. Whereas now it's all clouded by how it ended, you know what I mean? And like always that spectre of, even if you sort of say, oh, I enjoyed the 1st to 4th seasons because I didn't like the last one, you know what I mean?
Well, the funny thing is with Game of Thrones is season 4, season 5, that sort of area, probably some of the best television you will ever see on TV. Like, it was phenomenal. And that kind of gets brushed under the carpet now. That doesn't really get mentioned. And I know people are going to waiting to hear it. Lost has the same issue.
Scrambling to write a note.
When you hear about Lost, you've either got die-hard fans or people that just didn't like it. And a lot of the reason why they didn't like it was, well, 2 reasons they didn't like it. 1, they didn't like the ending. 2, they got confused season 3 and didn't bother carrying on, which is a completely valid, reason to drop off. I don't blame people for that. But I mean, you remember the first episode and how it just changed the face of television. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't get talked about enough. And there's a lot of shows like that. Yeah, you are right. It is interesting. Like, so we are reviewing a very different show as to what it was when this was airing.
Yeah, because everybody's opinions on this are ultimately fully formed now. You know what I mean? Like they've watched it all and have got their full. I mean, probably at the time you didn't realize you were going to get these extra 2 series like many years later. But you know, like you can sort of have this sort of full picture of what the TV show's about at that time.
But it's not even just that. I think, I mean, we try not to, but it colours our opinions of it now. Like, how many episodes do you think we've rated higher than average because we've gone in expecting this season to be below par?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we've discussed this ourselves on the podcast, where it's like, oh, I thought this show peaked at season 4, and season 6 we're still really enjoying.
Yeah.
And is that because we genuinely like it, or is it because we was expecting less? I don't know. It's hard to judge how different it would have been watching it week to week.
Yeah, and it's a shame. Like I said, it's something that you'll never. Unfortunately, time only moves forward, so you'll never be able to recapture that. So you always have to sort of try and take the opinions of people who were there at the time, I guess.
That's why I'm very interested in sort of hearing, like, what were people's opinions at the time? Do people remember even? Like, I know a lot of fans of this show I've rewatched X-Files tens of times, you know what I mean? And
yeah.
It'd be fascinating to know, like, what was it like when it was airing? Like,
Yeah.
what was the feel and vibe around the show around season 7 when, by all accounts, people seem to think this was it. This was it winding down.
Interestingly as well, this would have been... So, like, these days, talking again about having your opinion coloured, I think when you watch some of these days, it's very hard to not also have the internet influence your opinion, or like, you know, like the conversation around it influence it. Just for example, like at the moment, like we've got the new Game of Thrones, the House of the Dragon, and Lord of the Rings, two very similar shows, but very different in the way they approach sort of fantasy or traditional fantasy. And personally, I've completely stepped away from listening to any podcasts about it, reading any opinions on it, just because it's so like toxic online. And it's like, if you let that sort of get to your sort of review of it, you can go, oh, I didn't like this because I heard online that this character and it's like, I don't care. Like, I just want my opinion of it.
The reason, I'll tell you exactly the reason for that is because that sort of commentary on things gets more hits.
Yes, yeah.
Because if you get just as many hits by pissing people off as you do about people agreeing with you. And so if you manage to sort of hit that sweet spot where you're doing both at the same time, which is why I'm definitely not like bigging us up. Like, I'm not being like completely unmodest here. But we did say right at the start of the podcast, we don't want to be that. We want to be not positive for positive sake. We're not going to like, we'll still give our honest opinions. But we're here to enjoy the show.
There's episodes of this series where we've said it was very average, you know what I mean? Like, we walked away saying basically we wouldn't ever watch that episode again. But we sort of reviewed it and sort of took it critically of like things that we saw in it, what we liked and didn't like.
Yes, exactly.
So it's that broader conversation. Sorry, this is going very deep into the nature of a review. I've just realised that's not half.
I think it's important because we've made that conscious decision of we're not getting we like, how many times have we said we don't get into spoilers. We've made a conscious decision of we're going to enjoy this show for what it is, for whether we like it or not. We're going to enjoy it, and we're going to give an honest review. But we want to be positive. We want to have fun doing this, and we want our listeners to have fun, either reliving it or watching along with us. I don't understand this like need at the moment to like hate things, just live with hate, and then you can't just like, rather than hate a show, like 10 years ago you'd hate a show and you'd never watch it again, and now you hate watch it. And not only that, you listen to podcasts that hate trash it. And it's why live with that?
It's so bizarre. Like, I've actively dropped podcasts that have just been like shitting on things because it's just like, what is the point in this? Like, I don't understand like this endless sort of cycle of just misery. You know what I mean? That we sort of live in at the moment, where it's like, I understand now.
We're complaining about it.
I'm perpetuating this, but you know,
good night, everybody.
Like, ultimately, I'm just like, I'd rather listen to someone either be positive about the show, or, you know, if it's something
critical analysis,
critically like there's some kind of thought into it instead of just pure anger and things. You know what I mean? It's just pointless to me. But anyway, we digress.
I prefer podcasts where one of the hosts consistently makes controversial jokes and the other one has a distaste for everyone who listens to the podcast. That's my favourite type of podcast.
What are my controversial jokes? I don't know what they are.
You've got so many.
Maybe I'm so deep in it, I don't even know I'm being controversial.
Oh, you're so edgy, Luke.
I'm an edgelord without even realising I am. I'm just do I live in? Oh, anyway. Right. I was trying to think of something edgy to say then, but let's just get on with it.
Yes.
Production notes, you know.
Production notes, that's what we're here for.
Oh, anyway. X-Cops was not Gilligan's first attempt at writing a crossover. Almost 3 years before, he had developed a script that would have taken the form of an Unsolved Mysteries episode, with unknown actors playing Mulder and Scully and Robert Stack appearing in the role as narrator. The script was aborted and rewritten as the 5th season episode Bad Blood.
That would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
I'd love the idea of like a crime recreation. And so it's like an actor playing Mulder, an actor playing Scully. That sounds so funny.
It sounds brilliant, but yeah, I can understand them being like
difficult to pull off.
Yeah, and also it's like the stars of the show can kind of go, but what were we gonna do in that episode? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
that's an episode we don't get paid.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So yeah, I do understand it, but yeah, that would have been really funny. You know. And knowing it was Bad Blood as well, which, to be fair, as an episode, turned out really well anyway. So, you know what I mean? Like, we both really loved that episode, so maybe it worked out for the better. But anyway. Gilligan reasoned that because Mulder and Scully would appear on a nationally syndicated television show, the episode's main monster could not be shown, only hinted at. Gilligan and writing staff applied methods previously used in the psychological horror film The Blair Witch Project to show as little as the monster as possible while still making the episode scary. Michael Watkins, who directed the episode, hired several real sheriff's deputies as extras. Casting director Rick Millican later explained that the group needed actors who could pull off the believability in just normal off-the-cuff conversations of cops on the job. During the crack house scene, real SWAT team members were hired to break down the doors. Actor Judson Mills later explained that because there were a few cameramen and owing to the manner in which the episode was filmed, people just behaved as if we were real cops. I had other cops waving and giving their signals or heads up the way they do among themselves. It was quite funny.
Amazing. You can get away with so much.
Yeah, when you've just got a shitload of cops like just on your actual like set. They needed them on the one where the guy left the kidnapping baby. When members of the X-Files staff asked Cops producer John Langley about a potential crossover, the crew of Cops liked the idea and offered their total cooperation. Gilligan even tended the shooting of the episode. Inspired by Cops, Watkins' directing style was unique for this episode, and he even directly filmed some of the scenes himself. He also brought in Bertram Van Munster, a cameraman for Cops, to shoot scenes to give the finished product an authentic feel. In an attempt at realism, other staff members from Cops participated in the production, Daniel Emmett and John Michael Vaughan, 2 Cops crew members who featured in the episode's climax. I'm guessing they're the 2 who were in the cupboard.
Yes, I think so.
During rehearsals, Watkins kept the cameras away from the set so that when videotaping commenced, the cameras unfamiliar. God, there's a lot of words twisting me around today. Familiarity. God, unfamiliar on my tongue. That's what it is. Would create the unscripted.
No.
Oh, sorry.
Say it. Say the word.
The cameraman's unfamiliarity.
Yes.
Unfamiliarity. Yeah, it's a weird word. Unfamiliarity. Anyway, would create the unscripted feel of a documentary. In addition, a Cops editor was brought in to insert the trademark blur over the people's faces. And just a few more notes. The episode was one of 2 X-Files filmed that take place in real time, as we sort of mentioned. The only other one was Triangle, which was the one on the boat where they went back in time.
Yes, yeah.
And this is kind of what you mentioned as well. Due to the nature of the shooting schedule, the episode was relatively cheap to film and production moved at a quick pace. Initially, the actors struggled with the new cinema verite. It's got accents, so I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but there we go. And several takes were needed during the first few days, but these problems receded as taping progressed. On one night, 3.5 pages of script were shot in only 2 hours. The normal rate for X-Files was 3 to 4 pages a day.
That's insane, isn't it?
Yeah. Both Watkins and Mills likened the filming process to live theatre, with the former noting, in a sense, we were doing theatre. We were doing an act or half of a whole act in one take. I guess, yeah, you kind of just, when it's sort of filming like that, you're filming to a live audience that isn't there, essentially. You know
Yeah, exactly. And you've got it's rolling with whatever goes wrong as well. Like it's got to almost have that feel of like not rehearsed.
Yeah, and it's obviously they can do reshoots and stuff like that, but you kind of want to keep the flow maybe of the scene of how it's going, especially with the episode they're trying to portray anyway. Gillian Anderson called the performance fun to shoot and highlighted Scully getting pissed off at the camera crew as her favourite part to play. She further noted that it was interesting to make the adjustments to playing something more real than you might play for television. During post-production, a minor argument broke out between Vince Gilligan and the network. Originally, Gilligan did not want the Cops logo, the X-Files logo, to appear at any time during the episode. He stressed that he wanted X-Cops to feel like an episode of Cops that happened to involve Mulder and Scully. The network, fearing that people would not understand that X-Cops was an actual episode of the X-Files, vetoed the idea. A compromise was eventually reached. The episode would open with the Cops theme song, but the X-Files credits would appear after the opening scene. In addition, the commercial bumpers would feature red and blue lights flashing across the X-Files logo, while dialogue is heard in the background, in a similar fashion to the Cops logo. The episode would also feature a disclaimer at the beginning informing viewers that the episode is a special installment of the X-Files, to prevent watchers from thinking that the episode had been preempted this week by Cops.
That's one of those notes where I understand both sides. From an artistic point of view, Vince is completely right, where it should be as authentic as possible. However, you can't do that. You just can't. You can't build your show as another show. You just can't.
There's an example of that where literally what they're worried about actually happened. Do you know Inside Number 9?
Yes.
They, for anyone who doesn't know, Inside Number 9 is like this British sort of anthology show, kind of like Black Mirror, I guess. Like they have different stories each week. But anyway, they did a live episode for Halloween, and the sort of wraparound of it is they're going to do this live episode, and we sort of see them start the live episode. Then things start going wrong with the production of it, like the sound keeps going off, and then like the cameras keep cutting out, all these different things. And at one point they say, there's been a problem with this live episode. We're going to just show an episode from a previous series, so you've still got an episode to watch. Without spoiling it too much, that's not true. Halfway through that episode, or like as this episode starts playing, weird things start happening, and you realize, oh no, this is part of the production. The trouble is, as soon as they announce we're going to play a repeat, apparently a fifth of the audience turned off.
And that's the thing. You've got to like. I know everyone wants to be in this arty headspace, but you've got to think of that's what the money people are there employed to do.
It's one of those where it's like it's incredibly brave, but also it's good that it was BBC Two who can kind of make these like sort of they don't have to worry too much about it.
It stinks.
Welcome to the Critic Files.
I think I'm sort of around the 6 to 7 mark.
Oh, wow, 6 to 7.
Yeah, I and that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. I think I could have just done with a 15-minute segment of this. Like, almost, I wouldn't mind if like it was like a half-hour normal X-Files episode and a 15 minutes of Cops.
Yeah.
And that probably wouldn't work in practice, but yeah, I still enjoyed it for what it was. I think it's probably more 7, sort of down the sort of middle of it. Still a very good score.
I think this is possibly the biggest discrepancy we've had in terms of scores from me.
Okay, go on. What maybe have you gone for?
Next week might be different, but we'll talk about that next time. I've gone for a 10.
Wow, a 10. A 10. That is a bold move.
I love this episode. Really love this episode.
Fair play. You know what? No, that's what it's all about. And again, that's why it's so cool that they can take risks like this, because it's going to hit people differently, and it's going to hit what people like, and it's not going to hit with everyone. But that's why it's good to take those risks.
That's the thing. Like there's episodes of this as well where like you've loved it, and I've sort of been like kind of not thrilled by you. What's it? Jose Chung from Outer Space springs to mind, because I don't think I was too high on that one. I do need to watch that one again, though, because I feel like note-taking ruined that episode for me. But, like, the stuff like that where I think they're quite risky episodes, and I would imagine they are quite polarizing.
That's the whole point of them.
In some ways. I sometimes prefer that, like, because it's a lot of it's a bigger discussion point of, oh, did you love this, or did you did you not like it, and for what reasons? Like, I can completely understand all of the reasons you're giving for why you don't like it, but on the flip side, for those reasons, I love the episode. You know what I mean? Like, so it is this like kind of interesting sort of difference.
What did the audience think? That's the question.
Funnily enough, kind of falls in between the middle of us. So from 3,745 IMDb reviews, we're getting 8.4.
Okay.
So fairly high, but also not like ridiculous. Like,
I think that's a fair score for it. I definitely see why it's got that score.
As sort of an average. I can kind of understand that. But that's everything from this week. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can do. Twitter is always the best place to go to. If you go to at Most Unwanted Pod on Twitter, all the other ways to contact us in the production in the podcast notes, not production notes. We've already done that, but in the podcast notes beneath this episode, I think I need to stop talking. I keep stumbling words. Next week we are tackling first-person shooter, a genre we both love. In video games,
this can only go well.
I feel like I have to sort of lead a bit of build-up on this episode. I remember you texted me after this episode saying, "What the fuck was that episode?"
Wait, you gotta warn me before you like give them all a peek behind the curtain. It's the first time I've watched. You know what? I mean, we might. This is a teaser for next week.
Yeah.
But I remember texting you because we don't share thoughts or opinions of the shows before we go.
Typically not. No.
And so I text you saying, "What? Excuse my language. What the fuck was that episode of X-Files?"
Yeah.
Then you watched it and you text back to me, and we're trying to be cryptic about this, and you said. I think we're going to have very different views. And I believe I said, if this is in your top 5, I'm leaving the podcast.
and we'll end on that cliffhanger. We'll speak to you next time.
Bye!
Go on. You carry on, actually. Makes more sense.